Before Preschool All-Stars, she was a stay-at-home mom, completely lost on how to start a preschool. After joining Preschool All-Stars, she started her micro school and preschool. Now she has 8 preschoolers, 6 kindergartners, 7 second graders, 8 fourth and fifth graders. So she has a lot of students, guys. And tonight she's going to be speaking about micro schools. So I would like to introduce and welcome Heather Housen. Welcome, everybody. Show a hand of applause for Miss Heather.
So I guess my introduction kind of explained it. I was living in Boise, where Joy was living at the time, and I didn't know Joy lived in Boise. And I didn't know who she was. I just knew that I wanted to. I have 4 little kids. I still do. They're all under the age of 10. At the time, they were all under the age of 8. And I wanted a job where I could still be really active in their lives and their school, but also earn some money for my family, because I'd always worked before moving to Boise. And then I was like, yeah, my kids were going to go to kindergarten. I was like ready to, or my youngest were going to go to kindergarten. So I went to Joy's Summit in 2019 in October, and not knowing what the future of 2020 held, I was gung-ho, ready to go start my preschool. And I'm kind of one of those go big or go home people. So I didn't want to do it in my house, because my house is really, I live in a neighborhood with small houses, and I just didn't want that in my house. So even before I had my preschool planned, I was looking for a location. I came upon a location in February of 2020, even though I wasn't going to open until the fall of 2020. So I had to sign a lease. It was an expensive lease. And I signed it 2 weeks before everything shut down in our state for the government or the stay-at-home order. And I was stressed, to say the least. I hadn't planned on doing a micro school. I only wanted to do a preschool. And so I was stuck with a, $3,500 a month rental fee and no income other than my husband's, and he wasn't about to pay that with his income. So the summer of 2020 was one of the most stressful summers of my life. I'm sure Joy and anyone else that was on Preschool All-Stars at the time remembers I was constantly on there like, I have no students, I have nobody, I have nothing. And I was dropping flyers on doors. I was doing everything I was told to do. So whenever I read on Preschool All-Stars, like, I'm doing everything and I don't have anyone, like, it just like brings me back to that dark place. I was like, I know exactly how you feel. I know exactly how you feel. That's where I was. I mean, I had no problem doing summer camps because everyone had been homeschooling their children since March, and they just wanted to get them out of the house. So my summer camps filled up immediately. And at the first of the summer, I had some signups for little kids, but then slowly, as COVID got worse, they kept dropping out and saying they wanted to wait and see what happened and wait until next year. And I was losing students faster than I could get them. But my camps were still full, and it wasn't until August that my camp parents started getting paranoid about sending their kids to school. And I hadn't really heard that all summer long with the parents. Everybody was like, oh, we can't wait for school to open. We can't wait for school to open. And I was in the same boat. I wanted my kids to go back to school. And then by August, it was looking a little scary. And my son is diabetic, and his doctor kind of told us, like, if you can avoid it, I would. And then this mom came to me at art camp and asked me, if she's like, oh, have you been reading about these micro schools they're talking about in the New York Times? And I hadn't even heard about them. And she's like, would you start one? Would you do that? And I kind of laughed, because I still just had like preschool in my mind, even though it was August and I had 2 people signed up. I still wasn't ready to like throw in the towel. And so like another couple of weeks went by, and they asked me again. And at that point, like, nothing was looking better as far as my preschool. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I will. So I went home. I thought about the fact that I have 4 kids, that I could have them at my pod school and not have to send them to school. And so I just kind of mapped out, like, what would it look like? What do I want from my kids going to school online, because we'd all done that in the spring and it was a nightmare. And so the one thing that I remembered most was how hard it is to teach your own kids. And so I was like, you know what, if people aren't going to send their kids to school because of COVID, but they've already had to homeschool their kids in March, April, May, and June, and they already know how horrible it is to try and get your own kid to write a sentence or whatever, they will probably be so open to the idea of somebody else taking it on. And so that was kind of my sales pitch to them, was like, hey, remember how horrible the spring was? Like, nobody likes to teach their own kid, because I've been in my children's classroom and watched their teacher ask them to write a sentence and they just do it. But when I was homeschooling my kids in the spring of 2020, and I would ask my son, my second grader particularly, hey, you need to write one sentence. I mean, it was like in tears, on the floor, crying under the table because I had asked him to do this. So what I did first was reach out to my kids' friends' parents. So I had a pretty big list from the elementary school that my kids go to. So that was kind of my Rolodex to start with. So I'm on the PTO, so I think I might have had more than, I don't know, than most people did. So I just kind of sent out this mass email, but I had planned everything ahead of time because my kids were going into kindergarten, going into second grade, and going into fourth grade. So I wanted to keep it at that. And luckily, all of my kids' friends are kind of 2 years apart, so it worked out well. So I planned out how I wanted the day to look. And I did have preschoolers still signed up at the time. I still had 2 or 3 signed up. And I didn't want to just kick them out of the preschool since they were committed and they'd stuck with me through all of the COVID. So what I did for mine was I worked it out where, since my kids were going to kindergarten, I worked it out that the mornings would be set aside for preschoolers and kindergarten. And got a little confusing because the only preschoolers I still had were in the 3-day class. So it was preschoolers and kindergartners Monday through Friday, but it was just preschoolers on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that left Tuesday and Thursdays with just kindergartners in the morning. So I kind of opened up Tuesdays and Thursdays as extracurriculars for the older kids. So what I did was I contacted a local soccer coach and asked him if he would coach us on Tuesday mornings. And then our elementary school had just gotten rid of their Spanish program, and everybody was really upset about it. So I found a Spanish teacher and asked her if she would come on Thursday mornings and teach Spanish to my kids. So I had this whole, I had the whole day and the whole week set up when I sent out this mass email. It was kind of starting with, like a sales pitch, like, hey, like I said before, like, hey, you all remember the spring of 2020? Do you remember how fun it was to get your kids to read a book or do a book report? If you don't want to do that again, but you still don't feel safe sending them to school, I am opening a micro school. And for me, it's in a separate building, which I used as a sales point because there were a lot of people forming these little pods in their house. There were a lot of groups of 4 friends or groups of 5 friends who were all going to switch houses every day and do their online classes. And I knew that wasn't going to work because I had tried teaching a little class with my twins at my house. And the problem I found was if you're at your friend's house, you treat it like your own house, not a school. And so I knew that all those little pods would end up just in the playroom playing with their friends' toys or just going to their friend's bedroom and not doing school. So that was another sales pitch that I had was, this is a separate building. It's set up like a school. It's not familiar to any of your kids. So they're not going to just make themselves at home, and they're not going to be running to their friend's bedroom to play Minecraft or Nintendo Switch or whatever, because that's not going to exist here. And I honestly, I think my school was full in 48 hours. I mean, it was like I had worked all summer so hard to fill my preschool and gotten nothing. And in 48 hours, my pod school was full. So for me, it was just I have some background in marketing. So for me, it was like using the marketing of selling. For me as a parent, I had gone through all of that. So I knew like how bad it was teaching my own kids. I know that, I knew that like, if you're at your friend's house, that's not a school environment. That's a fun environment. That's like, that's a play date. That's not doing online school. I'm not certified to teach elementary school. So it was purely for every kid in, well, in the beginning of the year, every kid in my school was registered. I live in Boise, and they were all registered with Boise Online Schools. However, I knew that kindergarten can't be done online. I mean, that's really hard to like teach a kid how to hold a pen and do all this homework. And they were only giving, because my kindergartners were enrolled in Boise Online, and it was only taking them 5 minutes to do the homework. It was done. So having that teacher there, to teach them how to hold a pen, to sit down and watch them color and watch, just like, I don't know, I feel like that's so hands-on. Kindergarten, they're learning how to read. They needed that time to sit and read with the teachers. So every day with kindergarten and preschool, they would come in, and I skipped this part too. I did hire teachers. I could have never handled 28 students myself. And since I have 4 kids in the school, I didn't want to teach my own kids because, like I said, it was horrible. So I hired a teacher to teach kindergarten, and then in the afternoon she taught 2nd grade. And then I hired another teacher to teach 4th grade. We ended up with 1 5th grader and 1 1st grader. So the 1st grader was with the 2nd grade pod, and the 5th grader was with the 4th grade pod. So every day when the preschoolers were playing, in my preschool, I just have them play free time at the beginning. The kindergarten teacher would pull the kindergartners individually to read to her. So they would get that one-on-one, like assessing and reading with her so she could help them. And then for the 2nd graders, my teachers would basically, all the parents had to be on board with the fact that the kids weren't going to be sitting in front of a computer all day. And that was another thing that sold it for them, is saying that like, hey, everybody knows a kid can't sit in front of a computer for 7 hours a day. So if you come to my school, I have teachers who are going to hands-on teach this stuff. We'll have manipulatives that they can use, things that if everybody's learning decimals on one day, then my teacher is going to get up and give a lesson on decimals. It's not going to just be sitting there watching a video of a teacher online with all these little squares of other children doing whatever they're doing in the background while your kid's trying to learn decimals. And then it was just like with the Spanish classes, I mean, it was really fun because these kids all became so close. A lot of them were siblings. We had 28 kids, but only 6 families. So there were a lot of siblings. And it just gave, like, especially last year with COVID, and these parents were very COVID safe. So their kids weren't going on play dates. Nobody was traveling on airplanes. No one was going anywhere. So these kids were like the core group of friends for each other. So they would have play dates at each other's houses, but they wouldn't have play dates with neighbors or other things like that. So I think, like, if you're doing a micro school now, because I'm actually not going to do the micro school next year. I'm just doing preschool next year. And I decided that because I actually started having people start calling me about my preschool, because I think now preschool parents are at the point where they're ready to get their kids out the door because they kept them home last year, and they're like, okay, it's like, go somewhere. Because I think, like, in my neighborhood anyway, there's a lot of people working at home, and it's just hard for them to get the work done when they have their kid at home. Somebody asked what a micro school was. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. A micro school is, well, micro meaning small. It's just a very small school. So it was just like Natalie said, it was, 7 first graders. We ended up with 8 4th and 5th graders. So it was just a really tiny school. In the background is my preschool. So it's an old home. It's a 2-bedroom home, except we use 1 bedroom as an office. So the room that I'm sitting in right now is the main room where my preschoolers play in the morning. So it was complicated. My 4th grade teacher would come at 11 every morning when we would go to the park with the kids, and he would sanitize everything, and then he'd set up all these lecture hall desks, because every day it was changing from preschool to elementary, which was exhausting, but fun too. So if you're going to do it, you either probably want a room specifically for every age group and not be switching back and forth, or if you want to just do a micro school. I think the key to filling it this year is finding those people that still want that, because a lot of people are ready to send their kids back. But there are also parents who I think are just, like, I was just at a PTO meeting at my kids' elementary school, and enrollment is down 75 kids because a lot of parents, they're not going online next year, but they're just done with, like, they're either homeschooling or they're doing private school. They just want something different. I think the online schooling gave parents an insight to what public school is. And for me personally, it was seeing how non-challenging it is, and how I was disappointed to see what my kids were doing. I mean, in my opinion, they weren't doing enough. So at my micro school, we were taking what they were given by the Boise Online School, and then we were adding on to that. We were adding Spanish, we were adding soccer, we added hands-on science projects. We did things around the town. We did community service, was huge for our school. So we were adding a lot to that. And then if they were studying something online, we took it a step further. We brought in a guy from NASA who came and talked to them because the 4th graders were studying space. We took a field trip to a place called the Botanical Gardens here, which they have all these native plants, and the woman did a Lewis and Clark field trip for them because the 4th graders were studying Lewis and Clark. And so, like, trying to find all these extra hands-on things that they could do that made school better than what the public school system offers them, was our goal. And every single parent was thrilled with the micro school. They loved it. The kids loved it too. I mean, there was never one time where the kids were wishing they could go back where all their friends were. Even when the school opened up, which is 1 block from my school, and they had to walk to school seeing all their friends reuniting, they didn't even care. Like, they were all sad on the last day of school to not be coming back here. And they kind of felt like they were this little, my 5th graders, we started with 5 and we ended with 8, and the 5 would call themselves the OG because they thought they were like, I don't know, they were just like this core group of friends. It was great. But my first reach out to fill my school was my parents from my kids' school. So that is one place to look. If you know parents are disgruntled with the school, or maybe, like, I have one son who is highly, highly intelligent and never challenged. So if you have a friend or a classmate or something that is that, you could reach out to those parents and say, hey, we could do extra with. And that was another thing, is like offering parents that extra attention. I had one teacher for 7 kids and one teacher for 5 kids. So those kids who were really smart were able to have that teacher keep giving them work, instead of my son, when he's in public school, he's just sits there and waits. He does his work and he sits there and waits. And the teacher here, when he would get his work done, could continue to challenge him and ask him to do more, and just know that, sorry, I was trying to read this question. But if you can first start with people and then when I did have a couple kids leave, when public school opened back up, I had a couple kids leave, and so I wanted to fill those spots. If you go on Facebook, you can find groups. I was in one group called Boise Micro Schools, and it was not really people that owned micro schools. It was a lot of parents who were starting pods, and they were kind of trying to figure it out. And to be honest, like, every single one of those pods that I was talking about, where 4 kids go over to their friend's house, every single one of those fell apart within the first week of school. So marketing to parents that yours is a school setting, it's taken seriously, school's taken seriously. There aren't all these outside distractions of televisions and video games. For the people that came to my school, that was a big selling point. So there was in my town, there was a Facebook group called Boise Micro Schools. And I would just go on there and say like, hey, I own this micro school. And I would talk up some of the fun things that we were doing. I would say that we had Spanish class. And every time I'd say that my school had Spanish class, I'd get like 15 messages from people being like, oh, give me the name of your Spanish teacher. We want, and I was just like, oh, sorry, she doesn't have any day. And she really didn't have any other times left. But it was kind of like, well, if you come here, she's already here, but she really doesn't have any other space. And then there was another group, and this was more of a group for people who are really COVID conscious. And it was called like, well, it is, I still belong to it. It's called like protecting our children from COVID-19 or something. So it's a lot of people that go on who are really nervous and scared about COVID. But I don't think, I think a lot of people are going back. You'll still find people who are nervous about sending their kids to a big group setting. But I think also, like, we had 2 kids after Christmas, their parents hated the online school so much that they pulled them out of school and they had them homeschool, but they came to us. So I think that's another option, is going into Facebook groups for homeschoolers and saying, hey, like, I have this micro school. I am happy to work with your curriculum and homeschool your kid. If you don't want to send them, for whatever reason, people have all different reasons for not wanting to send their kids to public school, either the curriculum or the other students' influence or whatever. You can market to those people who want to homeschool, but they might not have the time or the skills to homeschool. So you could go to them and say, if you're homeschooling your kid, but you want a place for them to hang out with a small group of friends for socialization, and you want me to administer your homeschool curriculum. Now that would depend. If they had like a religious one, you may not want to do that. But the one that we had, this boy was really into nature. So his mom had found a nature homeschool and everything dealt with nature. And she would just send us his curriculum in an email, me and his teacher, kind of tell us what he was working on. And then we would just see, like, my second grade teacher was really good about going to the library and getting books on, if he was doing the moon or trees or whatever, she would get things to supplement that and work with him. So I think there's a lot of places to find. There's a lot of people who don't like public school. So I think there's a lot of, especially Facebook groups, where you can find those little niches of people who, for one reason or another, don't like the public school, who would be willing, who would want to send their kid to a small group setting and have somebody else do the work, because that's why everybody wanted schools to open up so badly, because most parents don't want to do the work. So if the parent has the money, then they're usually willing to pay. I mean, my school wasn't cheap, but these parents were willing, and I felt guilty because a lot of them were my kids' friends' parents who I'm friends with. And I always felt a little guilty about taking their monthly check. And every month they would be like, oh, thank you so much. And I felt like, why are you telling me thank you? You're writing me a check. But they really were so thankful that I had taken on this year to, like, keep their kids happy, because it was a lot to keep kids happy this year, especially the ones that weren't allowed to go to any public places or do anything fun outside of the home. So I've just seen on the side some people asking about, like, accreditation and things like that. So for me, I'm not accredited, especially in elementary. So that's why we chose to take Boise Online School students, because that left everything on the Boise School District. The testing, like, our kids would do their ISATs, or they would do their monthly assessments through their iPads or their Chromebooks. And we would just make sure that we were here and that we had a quiet testing environment for them. But everything was on the Boise School District to follow through with those things as far as that goes. And then with the homeschool kids, we never did their assessment. We would give, it was 2 boys, we would give them assessments just that we would get off of, like, teachers pay teachers, but it was nothing for the state. That was kind of on the parents. Like, next year when those kids go back to school, they have to take a test to get into their grade. And so it was really just our job to make sure that they learned what they needed to learn to move up a grade, which they definitely did. But I know a lot of schools are still doing online. So in Boise, there's not a ton that are sticking with it. But so if you find a place that still offers public school, online school, that's one way to get out of all the paperwork. And then again, just like the homeschool things, I think you just kind of, I mean, you could do a testing. I didn't personally, so I can't go into that, but you could arrange the state testing, because I do know that like my aunt homeschools and her kids get tested a lot just to make sure she's doing her job. So you could either put that on the parents or you could arrange it too. But I know we had a kindergartner too. And I think kindergarten here in Idaho is really easy because kindergarten is not required. So you literally don't have to do anything. Your kid can go to first grade and you just say, oh yeah, they did kindergarten. So the kindergartner that we had, we assessed her when we assessed the other kindergartners, but we didn't do anything with the state. And she was on board. She was reading really well. And we just looked at the state, what does she need to know, and made sure she knew it. And so when she goes to first grade, she'll just walk in there and say, yeah, I did a private kindergarten and I'm ready to go. So I basically took the easy route by not having to do any of the testing or assessing or accreditation or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know my time. I accidentally hit stop a while ago, so I don't know how I am on time, but I was going to say one more thing and I can't. Oh, as far as my teachers, I just made sure that they had background checks, and one of them was like a permanent sub in a school district here. So she had gone to school for education. The guy who taught my fourth grade class, he just taught the color guard at the local high school. So he had all the background checks and the child licensing and the CPR and first aid. So really all I looked at was like CPR, first aid, and background checks. And that was about as far. And I, of course, wanted people who had worked with children. So both of these people, he had worked with high school students, which was really good when he came to the fourth and fifth graders. And then my other teacher had worked in elementary. So they had a lot of experience with kids, which would be important. But I didn't have the money to pay a teacher salary. I paid my teachers $18 an hour. And I know teachers make more than that, but I also wasn't requiring that they had those degrees. So they took the job. Actually, my teacher who taught in the school district as a permanent sub was only getting $11 an hour. So she was happy to take my job.
If you loved today's episode, then you are going to love this. I want to give you a free gift in your hands. This is a copy of my book, Start Your Preschool, and I want to get it to you for free. Yes, I said for free. It is a 300-page book. It'll help you learn the step-by-step process to actually starting your local or your online preschool. Every single step that I walked myself through, as well as the thousands of women who've created their own successful preschools, have gone through the exact steps listed in this book. Not to mention, I also share 20 amazing women's stories. So you can see how not only did it work for me, but it works for amazing women just like you as well. I want to get you this free copy. Just go to freepreschoolbook.com or click the link in the description and we'll get it to you today. Again, just go to freepreschoolbook.com and we'll get it right to you.